Let's be real, you're scrolling right now trying to find something that's actually worth your time. Well, you can stop. You just found it. Today, we're not just going to talk about likes and views. We are going to break down the hidden science of what makes something connect and why most things just die in silence. We're decoding the real psychology that drives attention. All right, let's get into it.
For years, we've all been sold this idea, this old math, more views equals success. Simple, right? But it's also dead wrong. The new way of thinking, what we're calling psychomath, shows us that the real value isn't in how many people see you, but in how deeply you connect with them. We're talking about a shift from counting eyeballs to measuring heartbeats.
Okay, so if connection is the real currency, why are we all still so obsessed with chasing those giant, empty numbers? Well, that brings us right to our first section, the lie of big numbers. We're going to dig into how our own brains are literally hardwired to misread what success actually looks like, and how that leads us way, way off track.
It all boils down to this fascinating concept called logarithmic perception. See, our brains don't think in a straight line. They think in curves. Think about it like this. Going from, say, 100 followers to 1,000, that feels massive. It's life-changing. But going from 100,000 to 101,000, I mean, it's the exact same number of people, but it barely even registers. Our brain gets a thrill from the ratio, from the relative jump, not the flat number itself.
And if you think that's wild, get this. The neuroscience gets even crazier. That big rush of dopamine, the feel-good chemical, it doesn't actually hit its peak when you get the reward. No, it spikes in anticipation of the reward. This is the secret engine behind every great movie trailer, every product countdown. They're not selling you the thing. They're selling you that incredible, addicting feeling of what's coming next.
So, our brains are biologically hooked on anticipation. But how in the world do you turn that into predictable success online? That's what we're tackling in our next section, signal versus the noise. We're going to explore how you can build your own unique, predictable pattern in the absolute chaos of modern content.
And when I say chaos, I mean it. The scale is just staggering. A full 95% of everything posted online is just noise. We're talking random spikes that have no pattern, no retention. Some researchers have this great term for it, emotional entropy. It's basically just chaotic energy that disappears the second you look away. It feels like you're doing something, but it decays instantly.
So how do you build a clear signal that cuts through all that noise? Well, you use something called a Markov chain. Now, I know it sounds super complex and mathy, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's just a way of predicting what's going to happen next. Think of it like a chain of if-thens. If someone watches this video, what's the probability they'll come back for the next one?
And here's what that looks like in action. You're not just hoping for people to engage, you're actually designing their journey. State A, that first view, that's just a starting line. The real genius is engineering the path to state B, giving them a powerful reason to comment, and then creating an emotional payoff so strong that getting to state C, sharing it, feels like the most natural thing in the world. You're turning random passersby into predictable fans.
And you have to move them along that path fast. I mean, incredibly fast. There's something called the 7-second law. After just 7 seconds, that's it. 7, without a clear hook or a promise of a reward, viewer retention absolutely plummets by 54%. That's your entire window. So when you put all these pieces together, you get the core formula for making something truly stick. You need the right kind of emotion times a predictable structure that people can count on to deliver a reward. That's it. That's the recipe for replay value. That's how you turn a one-time viewer into a true follower.
All right, we've covered the math, we've covered the psychology. Now, let's talk about the biology. We're moving into our third section, the chemistry of hype. We are going to break down the literal chemical reactions happening inside your brain that drive every single scroll, every click, every single thing you do online.
This right here, this is the 3-part engine that powers every single successful social media platform on Earth. It's so simple, yet so powerful. First, there's the hook, something that grabs your curiosity and stops your thumb mid-scroll. Second, the reward, a quick, satisfying hit of insight, or a laugh, or shocking fact. And third, the loop, the unspoken promise that another, even better reward is just one more swipe away. And this loop isn't just a clever business model. It's a literal chemical cocktail being mixed in your brain. That first hook, that's a hit of dopamine. The ooh, what's this? Chemical. The reward you get, that releases norepinephrine, which locks in your focus. And that promise of more to come,
That delivers a steady drip of serotonin, the feeling of satisfaction that makes you want to do it all over again. So we've nailed the chemistry of a click. We know what's happening in the brain. But what is all of that emotion, all of that attention actually worth? That takes us to our fourth section. Attention becomes an asset, where we're going to stop talking about feelings and start talking about financials. We're going to reframe focus as a seriously valuable currency.
So one of the most powerful glitches in our brain's operating system is something called loss aversion. And the emotional math here is just wild. The pain you feel from losing something is about twice as intense as the pleasure you'd get from gaining the exact same thing. It's the reason why only 2 left in stock or sale ends in 1 hour works so well. They're not selling you something to gain. They're selling you an escape from the pain of missing out.
Now here's a key thing to remember. Not all attention is created equal. Think of it like a pyramid. The huge base of the pyramid, those are the people who just see your stuff. A smaller group moves up a level and actually likes it. A much smaller, more dedicated group climbs even higher. They come to trust you. But that tiny, powerful sliver at the very, very top, those are the people with real intent.
And this chart, this is why that pyramid is so incredibly important. Just look at these numbers. The seen category at the bottom, they convert at less than 1%. It's basically nothing. But once you earn your way up to trusted, that number jumps to 8%. And for that core group at the top, the ones with intent, you're looking at conversion rates over 20%. The game isn't about being seen by millions, it's about being deeply trusted by a few.
And all of this leads to a fundamental, game-changing shift in how we think. We have to stop looking at attention as just another vanity metric on a dashboard. It's not. It's capital. And just like any other form of capital, it is scarce, it is transferable, and most importantly, if you invest it wisely, it can generate absolutely incredible returns. Okay, let's bring this all home. We've gone through the psychology, the neurology, and the economics. Now it's time for our final section, the ownership equation. This is where we put all the pieces together into the ultimate formula for turning all this online hype into real, actual, lasting wealth.
But first, a really critical warning, and this quote just says it all. Attention without ownership is exploitation. I mean, think about it. If you build a massive audience on a platform you don't control, you're not building your business, you're building theirs. You become the product, and somebody else is cashing the checks on the value you're creating.
But if you flip that equation, if you get it right, everything changes. When you combine the valuable attention you've earned with direct ownership of what you create, your platform, your products, your equity, that is the formula for true wealth. That's the end game. Turning that influence you built into assets that you actually truly control.
And that really brings us to the final question, the one you should be asking yourself from now on. In this new economy of ours, every single second of focus, it's a transaction. So as you go back to scrolling tonight, ask yourself this. Is your attention just being spent, like a consumer, making someone else rich? Or is it being earned, turning it into your own capital? The choice and the whole equation is yours.
%of what you see online. It's basically noise, digital static. You get these immediate bursts of activity, but they vanish just as fast. You feel like you're doing something scrolling, but nothing really sticks.
Yeah, we call that emotional entropy. It feels engaging maybe for a second, but there's no structure for long-term retention, like a fire that just burns out instantly. This deep dive, it's about separating that signal from all that noise. We're using what we call psychomath. It's kind of the intersection of behavioral economics and probability, really trying to decode the math behind what makes content addictive, what gives it sustainable influence.
Right, and just so everyone's clear, when we mention OPS sources, that's the operational psychology study framework we're using for this analysis. Think of it like the blueprint for how algorithms learn from human emotion. And here's the core truth. Every single second you watch something or comment or share, that algorithm is learning you. So our mission here is to really break down the structure of content that makes the algorithm learn the right thing, that you're valuable, a connection point, someone carrying a signal, not just, passively consuming noise.
Exactly. And the big mistake, the foundational one most creators make, is relying on the, let's call it old math. They're just counting raw numbers, views, clicks, likes. But that data, it only tells you what people did. It completely misses the why. The real value, the actual metric, is the depth of the emotional connection you managed to create.
Okay, so that gets us to the lie of linear growth. Because my first thought, and I bet most listeners feel this way too, is, well, double my views, double my impact, right? But the OPS sources argue that's just fundamentally wrong because of something called logarithmic perception. Can you break that down simply for us?
Sure. It basically comes down to how we perceive scale, how humans judge magnitude. Our brains aren't wired for simple addition. We react to contrast, to ratios. Think about light. The difference between total darkness and one dim candle feels huge, right?
Yeah.
But add that same candle to a room that's already brightly lit, you barely notice. The objective change is the same, but the perceived change is tiny.
Ah, okay. So applying that to online growth.
Right. If you go from, say, 100 followers to 1,000, that's a tenfold jump, feels massive. It's a huge emotional hit, really gratifying. But take that same 900-person increase and apply it when you already have 100,000 followers. Going from 100,000 to 100,900, it barely registers emotionally. The number is identical objectively, but the subjective feeling, the value, almost zero. So just doubling your data doesn't double the belief or the impact.
That really reframes things. It means content needs to be designed around the feeling of movement, not just static numbers. People are drawn to trajectories, that sense that something is growing, taking off.
And that connects directly to the neurochemistry. The biggest dopamine hit, the real reward spike in the brain, it doesn't happen when you get the reward. It happens in the prediction of the reward. It's all about anticipation. So when creators sell that feeling of what's coming next, cliffhangers, teasers, countdowns, they're hitting that dopamine trigger hard, securing your attention before you even get the main content. They're selling possibility.
Okay, so if perception isn't linear, then behavior probably isn't random either. Which leads us to the math of predictability. Structuring that chase, as you put it, this brings us to the behavior loop and Markov chains.
Right, Markov chains. In simple terms, think of it as a mathematical way to measure the probability of moving from one state to the next, like predicting the weather. If it rained yesterday, the chance of rain today is different than if it was sunny. The key is the next state depends only on the current state, not the whole history before it.
So for content, it's like measuring the odds that watching this second makes you want to watch the next second. Structured predictability.
Exactly. And the OPS data pinpointed this core structure that really maximizes that probability. It's called the addictive triad. These are the three cues that, when you repeat them consistently, just really spike retention.
Okay, let's list those. This sounds like the architecture of stickiness itself.
Okay, first is anticipation. That's the hook, setting up the question, the what's next. Second is the payoff, delivering that main answer or insight you promised. And third, crucially, is the micro reward. This is like a small confirmation, a little insight, maybe even just a satisfying sound that signals the end of that little loop. When a creator nails cycling through those three states, the probability of the user sticking around goes up by about 0.27 for each cycle completed.
Wow, okay. That fractional increase is how influence actually compounds then. But what about when the chain breaks? We've all seen creators blow up once, one huge viral hit, and then now, poof, they vanish.
That's because they delivered the initial payoff, maybe even really well, but they didn't build a predictable transition to the next state. The audience liked it, sure, but they couldn't guess when or how the next reward would come. A Markov chain needs that reliable transition map.
So this is something practical for you, the listener. You need to build your own transition map. Look at your last, say, 10 successful posts. What were the top 3 reactions or comments you got? Now, draw arrows between reactions that showed up twice in a row across those posts. That repetition, that's your personal signal path. That's the pattern you need to lean into.
Yeah, and anything that doesn't fit that repeated pattern, statistically, it's just emotional entropy, it's noise. People often call virality luck, but it's really more of a high probability cascade. It gets triggered by emotional clarity. And this brings up the 7-second law that OPS identified.
Right, the one that says the most viral stuff had a clear emotional point and a measurable payoff within just the first 7 seconds.
Exactly, and it's not arbitrary. The research was pretty clear. After 7 seconds without some kind of reward or resolution, retention plummets by 54%. Those 7 seconds are like architecturally vital. It's the maximum window the brain gives for anticipation before it demands some compensation. If the payoff isn't there, the odds of continuing just collapse.
So the formula isn't luck. It's something like emotion times predictability equals replay value. Okay, let's shift then to the architecture of attention itself, the sort of psychological flow of a successful piece of content.
Well, we see users move through 3 pretty distinct psychological phases, and these line up nicely with states in a Markov chain model. Phase 1 is the curiosity load. That's the what is this? What am I about to get stage. Phase 2 is the reward spike. The okay, that's clever. I get the value now moment. And the final and really critical phase is the ownership echo. That's the, I want to share this. I want this insight to be part of me, part of my identity.
And how fast someone moves between those states, that depends on emotional friction, right? The sources really stress using only one dominant emotion per segment. Why is that clarity so vital for moving people along?
Well, because you can't really move people effectively if they can't predict the mood, you know? If one little segment is trying to be funny and serious and super informative all at once, it creates cognitive friction. It's just harder work for the brain. Clarity reduces that mental effort. When the mood is predictable, the transition probability, that chance of moving to the next state, goes up.
And this successful movement, it's actually chemically powered in the brain, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The curiosity load, that delivers dopamine, keeps people hooked, wanting more. The reward spike, that releases norepinephrine. That's what locks in focus, sharpens memory. It's the moment they actually remember the point you made. And the loop itself, that feeling of satisfaction that makes you want to come back, that's driven by serotonin. So essentially, you're designing a safe, predictable neurological reward pathway for your audience.
But even the best pathway runs into habituation, right? Attention spans aren't infinite. They seem to collapse in waves, maybe every 12 to 17 seconds. The brain just gets used to the input, so we have to actively shake things up.
Exactly. That's where pattern interrupts are essential. They have to be intentional shifts. It could be a sudden visual change, a switch in audio, maybe asking a direct question. Anything that basically jolts the brain slightly and forces it to reset its attention clock. Without those interrupts, that probability cascade you've built up just starts to decay.
Okay, let's pivot a bit, moving away from just chasing applause, the vanity metrics likes, towards generating real signal, something sustainable, something that compounds value. Signal feels slower, maybe, but it's what actually builds wealth. This gets us to the harder math of conversion.
Right. For that, we use the OPS conversion probability formula. It helps measure what really matters for turning that attention into actual capital. It looks like this. Conversion probability equals CTR times, then in parentheses, AVP times APV, and then that whole thing times a trust factor.
No, okay, hold on. Let's define those acronyms. That's a few variables there.
Right.
What's AVP and APV stand for?
Good question, yeah. So CTR is your click-through rate. Basic measure of did they click. Pretty standard. But the real engine is in the parentheses. AVP is average view duration, how long they watched in total seconds. And APV is average percentage viewed, what fraction of the content they actually got through. It's relative retention.
Okay, and why multiply AVP and APV together? Why not just add them or something?
Multiplication is the key there. It represents compounding belief. See, if you only look at CTR, you just know they clicked, maybe bounced immediately. If you only look at duration, AVP, they stayed, but maybe they zoned out. But when you multiply duration, AVP, by the percentage viewed, ABV, you're measuring not just time spent, but intentional time spent engaging with a meaningful portion of the content.
Got it. So the big insight here mathematically is that doubling your average view duration, that AVP, it's actually worth more than, say, tripling your initial click-through rate.
Precisely. Doubling AVP compounds belief and engagement inertia. Mathematically, the longer they watch and the more completely they watch, the probability of them taking the next step, like converting, goes way up.
Okay, and this is where behavioral economics really comes into play. We have to start seeing attention as actual tradable capital. It's scarce, it's volatile, and it can generate yield. And the most potent psychological bias here seems to be loss aversion.
Oh, it's incredibly powerful. The basic psychology is this. The pain of losing something or even just missing out on something is roughly twice as powerful emotionally as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent.
So applying that, it's more than just slapping only 3 left on something. How do creators actually structure their message to tap into that 2x power?
You need to frame the opportunity itself as a diminishing resource. You're not just offering a product or an idea. You're offering access to something that's closing soon. A time-sensitive insight, maybe a knowledge gap that's about to be filled by others, or entry into a community that has limited spots or closing window. You shift the focus from what they stand to gain to the potential pain or disadvantage they avoid by acting now.
Makes sense. And this connects to the different states of the audience, right? You can't treat everyone the same.
Absolutely not. Everyone interacting with you is basically in one of 3 states: curious, convinced, or committed. Your content structure, your entire communication strategy needs to be designed specifically to help them transition from their current state to the next one.
And this progression, this transition map, it's quantified in what the sources call the pyramid of perception.
That's right. At the very bottom, you have basic visibility. These are people who just stumble across your stuff. Conversion rate there, less than 1%, pretty low. Move up a level, you get to earning trust. These are people who've engaged enough for the algorithm or for you to see they're interested. Conversion here jumps up, maybe to around 8%. But the top, the gold standard, is the committed group. This is the audience following you with real intent. Their conversions, often over 20%. So the goal isn't just massive, shallow visibility. It's building deep, predictable influence with that committed group.
Which ultimately shifts the dynamic, moving the audience from just being a passive consumer to potentially an active partner. And the psychological trigger for that seems to be the endowment effect.
Yes, the endowment effect. It's fascinating. It basically states that the moment you feel a sense of ownership over something, doesn't matter if it's a physical object or an abstract idea, like being part of an exclusive group, its value roughly doubles in your mind. So by giving your audience small things to own, exclusive insights, maybe small responsibilities within a community, early access, you make them feel like co-owners of your journey. Their perceived value of being connected to you skyrockets.
And this really draws the line, doesn't it? If you generate tons of attention, huge views, but you have no way to claim direct ownership or connection with that audience, then you're the product. Someone else is cashing in on your virality.
Exactly. The core formula for building real, long-term success flips that. It shifts from just getting eyeballs to actually generating assets you control. The equation becomes attention plus direct ownership equals wealth. That's how you transform those likes, views, followers, things you don't own, into tangible assets and capital that are actually yours.
Okay, let's bring this all together then. You've just heard the mathematical blueprint, essentially. Virality isn't some chaotic mystery. It's calculated emotion. It moves through predictable states governed by probability and, well, brain chemistry.
Yeah, the underlying human needs driving this. The need for a hook, for a reliable reward, for a sense of belonging, that's timeless. So now, when you're scrolling, you're hopefully no longer just consuming. You're starting to see the mathematical matrix behind it all.
So here's the final transaction for you, the listener, to consider. In this economy, the attention economy, hype isn't just random noise anymore. It's actually a form of negotiation. Every share, every single second of your focused attention, that's currency. It's being exchanged constantly in this marketplace.
So the only real question left, now that you understand the equation, is this. Are you going to keep spending that attention currency primarily as a consumer, making someone else wealthy in the process? Or are you going to start actively earning from it, turning that attention into your own sustainable capital? The choice and the whole mathematical architecture to do it, well, it's now yours to command.